we do believe that there's a much bigger opportunity to impact the productivity level of manufacturing shop floors. We think that really the people that are super inspired by what they're doing because they believe they've done a great job, because they've done the things they're supposed to do next, and they've done those right. Those people will build great products, and the people who build great products will be great manufacturers, and manufacturing is the backbone of the economy. And so we've got this pretty big vision that we can drive workforce productivity, workforce happiness, and outputs at the manufacturing level by delivering like really simple, user-centric interfaces that walk people through what they're supposed to do the right way and at the right time.
Let's discover what people are building in the greater Cleveland community. We are telling the stories of Northeast Ohio's entrepreneurs, builders, and those supporting them. Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today I had the absolute pleasure of speaking with Gerald Hetrick. I've actually had Gerald on the show once before. Those of you who have been with Lay of the Land from the beginning may recall Gerald as one of the first entrepreneurs to make an appearance back on episode 6, which I would encourage anyone interested in learning Gerald's personal and entrepreneurial journey, co-founding and leading 2 companies from inception to exit, spanning his time building MCPC, Vox Mobile, and Able, to take a listen to that episode. Gerald is an incredible storyteller and sets a great stage there for our conversation here, where we pick up on where we left off and cover what has transpired in the years since. It is pretty incredible how much has changed in this interim period and how impactful Gerald has been in driving that change. As CEO of Able, Gerald led the organization through 5 years of 100% year-over-year growth, a $7 million Series B fundraise, and ultimately a successful exit in early 2022 to Bullhorn, a leading software platform for the staffing and recruiting industry. With the time and the space to reflect post-acquisition, Gerald resolved to be retrospective and learn from the lessons of his failures and successes over his 25 years of entrepreneurial experience. And in this time, he came to the conclusion that he loves building great companies, and that so many of the issues he encountered and struggled with in the process of building great companies were self-inflicted, recognizing how much more impactful he could have been had he prioritized running on a consistent business operating system like EOS, and ultimately these operating systems provide leverage and not overhead. Collectively, these realizations amounted to Gerald becoming CEO of another Cleveland growth-oriented technology startup called Bezlio, in addition to starting his own EOS implementation practice, coaching other growth-minded leaders willing to invest in making their visions reality and their teams as healthy as possible. At Bezlio, Gerald is focused on ensuring manufacturing shop floor employees know what to do next and how to do it right, believing deeply in Bezlio's opportunity to significantly drive middle market manufacturing growth and prosperity writ large. To that end, Bezlio recently closed on a $4.5 million seed round to invest in massive product improvements to its cloud-based enterprise resource planning platform and their overall go-to-market strategy and customer relationships. This was a really fun and candid conversation, understanding how Gerald has evolved as a leader, closing out Able's chapter, starting Bezlio's chapter anew, and building his coaching practice in service of other founders trying to build great organizations, his approach to dreaming big and operating practically, and many other reflections along the way. So please enjoy my conversation with Gerald Hetrick after a brief message from our sponsor. Lay of the Land is brought to you by Burden D. Morgan Mentoring at Jumpstart. It is impossible to tell the stories of entrepreneurs building in Cleveland and across Northeast Ohio without acknowledging the impact of our collective mentoring community. Over the past decade, Burden D. Morgan Mentoring at Jumpstart has helped hundreds of mentees, some of whom we have heard from as guests on this very podcast, realize their innovative visions. Our guest today, Gerald Hetrick, serves as a Burden D. Morgan mentor alongside many other local founders and subject matter experts. These volunteers are passionate about sharing their time, talent, and lessons learned to grow and accelerate the next generation of entrepreneurial students and startup leaders. To learn more about Burden D. Morgan Mentoring and other free services available to Northeast Ohio entrepreneurs, please go to jumpstart.org/startups. Burden D. Morgan Mentoring is made possible with funds from the Burden D. Morgan Foundation. You are now officially the first person to make a second appearance on the podcast as a guest, which is really exciting to me, I think, when you think more holistically about the overstory of entrepreneurship and things going on here. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. I'm super honored. And I guess congratulations, because when we did the first episode, was I the first episode?
Number 6.
I was number 6. So I was very early and did it, sitting in a chair in my bedroom, locked down because of COVID. And I remember thinking, another podcast, like, can you really put together like a long, like sustainable podcast series about entrepreneurship in Cleveland? And I'm super impressed. It's been how many episodes now? Like
130 plus, 150 in the bank.
150. So yeah, I'm at this point, it's not your privilege for me to be here. It's my privilege to be here. So so thanks for having me again.
Well, I am very appreciative of you being here as well. And I'm excited to chat more about, what's transpired since. I don't think we need to go back through the origin story, if you will. When I thought about like what I wanted to focus on today, I'd really love to unpack in earnest your approach to the conclusion of the chapter to Able, and subsequently your mentality, mindset, thinking around how to figure out what to do next.
Sure.
And then obviously, we'll talk about Bezlio and the work you're doing now, but kind of that liminal space between the two things.
I mean, when we, I guess at a high level, I'll riff a bit and then.
Yeah. So that our last conversation, just to rewind the clock, I checked before we came here. We're going back to January 2021.
Okay.
So you guys had just closed.
The deal had just closed. Yeah, sure. Wow. I don't remember. I can't remember anything I said in that last podcast. But
I have some bits of wisdom.
Sure. Okay. When we signed the LOI to sell Able, call it 4 or 5 months before that, I was single tracked. Like, we're going to get this deal done. I was, passionate and steadfast. It was the right decision for the company, for the employees, for shareholders, for myself. And so I frankly did not spend a lot of time at all on what was next. About a week or two before the close, I had some conversations with the leadership team at Bullhorn, who was our acquirer, and they were fantastic. And we went through some of the different options I had if I was going to remain. I was, and I don't even want to say I was being selfless. I just wasn't thinking, and my own personal next step wasn't really in my mind. Again, not out of selflessness, just out of like need to focus on the close, right? I mean,
for sure.
Because the funny thing about selling a business, particularly when there's bankers involved and a large private equity group involved, is that it's all business until the deal closes, and you're reminded constantly this could fall apart at any second. There's no guarantees, and I just lived in this moment of getting it done. And then when the deal closed, I took a day or two, maybe recovered from our celebration, had a little bit of fun, and then it was back to work. And I did have a job, I had a role, and I think, at our last conversation, I was probably just starting to absorb what that role was. I'll say I remember Dave Lohman told me, you're going to hate the 6 months after close. And Dave was our CFO at Able, and a great friend, and had kind of a great business coach for me along that journey. And because he had some exits, he's like, "You're gonna hate this." I'm like, "Dave, how can that be? It's this great winding up of this chapter. We had a very intentional process. We did what we said we were gonna do. Everyone benefits greatly. How can I hate the next period?" He's like, "Well, you're gonna feel lost. You're gonna miss. You were the problem solver, and then now there's no problems to solve." I thought he was wrong. Of course, I thought the role that I was taking on Bullhorn was great, and then I just learned lots of hard lessons that he was right, but from a number of different angles. And so I probably floated in the ether of any clarity of what I wanted to do for quite a while after that.
Yeah. What were some of those lessons learned?
Well, I was sure that I can make rapid decisions about what to do next and not need to put a lot of thought into it. Like, I was like, I'm such a whole person. I have such a high emotional IQ, and I've got it all put together, and I'm all that. I don't need to like take any time for myself. I don't need to like, go kind of find who I am again. I can just make a rapid decision. An offer comes up, here I go, and away I go. And so, I made a couple false starts. I made a few, jumped in, half in with the Bullhorn role, and with a couple other things. And it took me kind of a while to sort out what I really want to do next. And frankly, that's still a work in progress. Like, I'm still in the pursuit of what does, the next 5 years look like.
Yeah.
I've had 2 back-to-back founding to leaving journeys that have taken 15, 16 years combined with no time in between. And so now I'm, in my kind of 3rd chapter of like, what do I do next? And I think I've got it sorted out, but it's not easy. It's not, I guess the lesson learned is that it isn't going to be super apparent, and it what you did before has nothing to do with what you're going to do next type thing.
Yeah. And we'll definitely go deeper into that whole world. But the last time we spoke, you had mentioned how much you had learned from your journey at MCPC, at Vox, about leadership, culture, strategy, the whole startup process. Mm-hmm. If you now take your experience at Able and kind of layer it on top of that stack of experience, what do you feel are the earned lessons and wisdom that you're taking with you from Able that you didn't have before?
So great question. And at my new gig at Bezlio, we're making some decisions to do things and a lot of to operate our business and build our culture in a certain way. And some of that is purposeful based on me spending time in retrospect of what went well or didn't go well at Able. Able wasn't all rainbows and unicorns. It was, of course, a grind and a journey of ups and downs. I'd say that I operated by instinct quite a bit at MCPC and at Vox Mobile. And then I kind of fell in love with my instincts and, developed a bit of an ego. I remember we had an early meeting at Vox Mobile around in which Chris Snyder was encouraging us to be vulnerable and talk about, what parts of ourselves we wanted to like better during the journey. And at that moment I had pretty low self-esteem. I didn't really feel like I fit in the room of leaders I was around. I quickly moved beyond that and started to buy into myself a little bit too much. And when I got to Able, I kind of knew that I needed to not just operate on instinct and needed to put some frameworks in place, but ultimately we moved really fast and I made some good decisions and, we had a successful outcome. Still, there were things, there were warts and scars and cracks and crevices that we had in that business that I was aware of along the way. And I kind of deprioritized needing to impact. Looking back at that, it's like, okay, I can see now how that affected our outcome. I can see why, maybe being maybe not driving alignment and accountability as strong as I could have. And I thought I did a pretty good job, but mostly based on my own voice, not based on any kind of framework or methods. And so looking back now, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to start another business. I can, I want to start from the beginning, building, putting a process in place such that we have a strong foundation for alignment and accountability. Product is another one. So, honestly at Able, I don't want to say I had a healthy disrespect for product. I didn't understand product. I really didn't get the difference between, particularly the early years, the difference between, observing needs and creating solutions to problems and then, manifesting those into like actual priorities for engineers. I didn't get the difference between that and just like putting a bunch of smart people in a room and saying, go build me something that's cool. Yeah. And it wasn't until like the second half of the journey that I realized the mistakes we'd made that frankly, holy shit, like we've got this thing lots of people are using, but we're kind of stuck in the mud as it relates to progress here. Like we can't really move it forward at the velocity we'd want to because we don't have a strong product process. So we brought in a chief product officer, Dustin Brewer, who who was revolutionary for us, along with our CTO Dominic O'Connor, who was also a second half of that journey person. But we'd already made some mistakes, and we already had the cart was already out of the barn or whatever that analogy is, and we couldn't like go turn the table. So looking back now at Bezlio, we're building a whole new version of a product and taking it to market, and we're doing that like with product at the forefront, with like trying to be really good about how we think about product and not just build cool stuff because we think it's cool.
Right.
So I think being better about product, which is the more specific thing, and then being even more stringent about forcing alignment and accountability.
Yeah, no, I think those are really interesting reflections, particularly the idea of like how difficult it can be to address foundational things that weren't set up in the way that you now believe they should be, versus like how much easier that is to, from a blank slate, kind of set it up the way that you would like it.
When we raised our Series A at Able, we went out and built a team. I felt all powerful for a moment there. I felt like, listen, I'm doing this and we're growing month over month. The growth is happening. We're fighting through the hard challenges. We're addressing problems. We're surfacing issues and solving those. I felt really good about that. And then, in kind of post-close conversations with people I'd become great friends with or people on the journey, like I learned like it wasn't all that great for them all the time. Like, and sometimes like it was just me trying to speak from a pulpit around this is how we're going to do it and rah-rah and get everyone together. And I just assumed that all worked. And, in retrospect and trying to be vulnerable about it, didn't always all work. And so it can't just be me or some other leader just saying how it is. You have to drive this notion of buy-in. And I always preach this, the concept of buy-in. Maybe. So I guess I'm not saying, I guess I'm not willing to step out on my ego enough to say it was bad, but I think there's certainly opportunities to improve. And I'd be foolish if we didn't try to learn from that a bit.
Yeah. Can you kind of take us through the whole Bullhorn acquisition? Like how much of that, was planned in advance? Where did it kind of come from strategically? Was that the direction you were ultimately trying to go? Just kind of piece together the end of that chapter.
Yeah, I mean, now that the deal's done and sunk in, and we're a couple of years down the road almost here. I mean, the more detail is easier to share. I mean, the truth is, and there was a pitch meeting in early 2017. I had just agreed, I guess, to build and lead Employee Stream, as it was called then, with Aaron Grossman and Rob Sable, who were the CEO and CIO of the Talent Launch staffing agency, and they built this product inside the organization, and they needed capital and leadership to kind of take it out and commercialize it and drive it. And so, so I just agreed to do that, and I decided that I wanted to build a business in Cleveland. I wanted to become part of and then become a presence inside of the tech startup ecosystem in Cleveland. And I intentionally wanted to raise money here in Cleveland. Those are things I said. And so the first version of the pitch deck we built, we went to Jumpstart. We had a relationship with some folks at Jumpstart because they were investors in Vox Mobile. And I made a call to Jumpstart and got invited in. And Aaron and Rob had also had some early conversations with those folks. And the very first pitch deck I had an exit slide on there. And it said one of the opportunities to soft land the business was an exit to Bullhorn in 3 to 5 years. And it had numbers on there that were shockingly close to what we did. So I'm not going to go as far as say we planned that from the beginning, but like we knew that this ecosystem we were in, I was able to quickly identify the ecosystem we were in only had a few acquirers. There's only a few people that were going to buy growth-oriented, SaaS businesses in the market, and thus the multiples that were being paid. There's only a couple businesses that were going to buy. So all along, I think we kind of knew there was a possibility. I'll say though, the vast majority of the journey, the next 4.5 of the 5 years, were spent, thinking that we were competitive to Bullhorn. That we were certainly a partner of theirs, and they were gracious partners, and they were wonderful. They did wonderful things in the space. But we thought we had a superior product, and then we thought we were ahead of the market in the things that we did, and we thought we were tip of the spear as it related to candidate experience, which became such an important thing.
Yeah. And
so we were out to win, frankly. The clarity we had though was that we were in a smaller market. Staffing, while it's there's 10,000 plus traditional staffing agencies, and a big bulk of the economy are contingent labor that goes through staffing agencies. The technology space there is relatively small. And so we had a couple different capital strategies. One in which we would raise an appropriate amount of capital, be super capital efficient, and exit inside of staffing, or one in which we would pivot to the larger commercial space, and we would compete in HR tech, which is extremely crowded.
Yep.
We would raise much larger rounds, and we would go try to go for a vastly larger exit, and our exit was great. So those two strategies were kind of always in my mind. I had wonderful partners in the local investors here with North Coast and Jumpstart, and M25 out of Chicago, and ultimately Plymouth out of Ann Arbor, who led our Series A. We had wonderful partners, and they were very encouraging of me doing what I thought was right. And so as 2020 was happening, it became super clear that the market we had built, and frankly, I do believe we built the market, had now become a thing. The larger players had decided they were going to dominate the market, and so we had to compete or die. And so I started running some informal processes around and having some conversations around, should we be acquired by a couple of folks? There was only a couple of people out there. We had some conversations. We had some good relationships at Bullhorn. And so, I had a on the trade show floor conversation at one of the trade shows that materialized quickly, and away we went.
Yeah. It's fun. I always find the strategic dynamic of playing nice in the sandbox with the person who is going to make that build by partner decision, the frenemy kind of
I mean,
walking the line.
One of the fun stories we have is we were the best show we ever had. We had a lot of leads from trade shows. One of the best trade shows we ever had was they call it their Bullhorn Engage. It's their user conference. And I forget the year, it might have been 18. We went there, we got 100 leads, and we probably converted 20 or 30 of those within 3 or 4 months. It was amazing. And then we were uninvited back the next year. We were a partner, but I mean, we kind of dominated the room, and they had a competing product because they had acquired a competing product. And so, I mean, they made the right decision, but we were uninvited from the show floor. We had a room like this, the second or third floor back in a hallway. And it was a terrible event for us. And I remember feeling like, you know what, that's it. We're going to go win. So the only other, I guess there's lots of great moments of decision points in that story, but I did do a pitch day at Sierra Ventures out on the peninsula. I went out there. There was a couple other folks. Chris Beck from Performix was with me, and I pitched to 21 VCs. These are all larger funds, all invest in unicorn or bust type companies.
Yep.
And the responses from my pitch were awesome. Like people like, that was incredible, really well spoken, great pitch, super succinct. The responses to me, I felt, were really strong. My 2 or 3 of them, like, hey, if we were to invest, would you move this business to San Jose?
Sure.
The responses to the opportunity given the market we were in were just ho hum. They were like, listen, we would need a lot. You would need to commit to bringing in a lot of capital and an immediate pivot outside of staffing to a different place. And we just, as partners, sat around the table, and that was a path, but we just didn't think it was for us right at that moment.
Yeah. So Able is acquired by Bullhorn. You take some time to, well, I guess you thought maybe you didn't need the time to think about, what
I did not take time. I started 3 days later. I joined the marketing leadership team meeting at Bullhorn as a new employee. 3 days later, it was incredible.
So, as you made your way through the post acquisition process, at what point do you begin to think that you actually do need the time to think and like tabula rasa, clean slate, really intentionally figure out why it is you want to get back into the arena and where you want to focus your efforts, and how do you just approach the whole process of, given your track record and success that you've had in earnest, you could do anything that you want.
Sure.
Right? So like, how do you begin to think about what it is that you actually want to do next?
Well, I probably had 3 moments, 60-ish days after being at Bullhorn. I realized I was taking someone else's job, that I wasn't passionate about the role they had me in, that they were super gracious, and I had a great leader, and this gentleman, John Bedard, who led the product marketing at Bullhorn. I just realized this was someone else's role. They had the right role. They had the right seat, I guess, using an EOS term. They didn't, or even a Collins term. They just didn't have the right person. I was not a fit for it. And they were paying me well. And frankly, the future success of the product we had sold to Bullhorn required that role to be really good. And I wasn't being really good. So that moment, I knew I needed to take a step back. I was very scared. I didn't want to take any time off. Financially, I could have done it. Family would have been super supportive. In fact, my wife probably begged me to do it. I just didn't want to. I didn't want to like not have a job. I didn't want to feel like I was floating and then get used to that and then, be forgotten, frankly. I wanted to still be in the game. I guess I left that role, took a job that ended up being a short stint, and then 90-ish days later from that. So I think maybe late summer of last year, I was like, wow, I really have to step back. I did the math. I didn't spend time in college. I went right from, I had a couple semesters at John Carroll, but I went right from like high school to full-time work and never looked back.
Yeah.
And I'll be 44 next month. That's a long time of just go. And not saying that I deserve a break, whereas the majority of the American economy doesn't get that. But like I felt, hey, I've earned this little bit of time. So I literally just need to take a step back. So I don't remember the exact time, but I do remember thinking, I don't know exactly what's next. I'm going to go join Impact Architects with Chris Snyder, who had built this great framework of a business for I think he calls them solopreneurs or solo entrepreneurs, to like do exactly what I wanted to do, which is take a little bit of a break, do some coaching and maybe do some consulting, and then like just ease my way into it. And so that's what I did. So late summer, and I felt terrified, but also a little bit relieved that, a couple of weeks into that, I'm like, okay, I can recharge a bit here. I can figure out where I can go be a good version of myself, if not a great version of myself. And so probably, late Q3 or early Q4 last year.
Yeah. So I definitely want to pull on the coaching thread, and we'll get to Bezlio in there. But just kind of higher level question, at that point in your reflections, what does that best version of yourself look like? What is it that keeps you motivated? How are you thinking about like what it is to be successful at that point?
I have a wonderful wife and 4 incredible children. And I had, through my journey of trying to build businesses, I went from a single guy living in Lakewood, jumping on planes whenever I wanted to go around the world to having our 3rd family home and having children in school. And I never really evolved myself in the context of being that person. I just evolved myself in the context of being better at building businesses. And so like my wife and my family kind of just went along that journey with me, and I just drug them through whatever. So I didn't realize the degree to which I could be moody, or that I was, living, unhealthy as it related to just like physical health, or that I needed to provide more than just like, the money for people to have a great life. And frankly, I didn't even really figure that out in that moment to the degree at which I should have, but I needed to think about my life as more than just like Gerald being successful at work. And I don't know, like there's probably a therapy session or 2 I should do at one point to kind of dig into that. But like, I needed to be okay with not like succeeding, or not like being in a room where people were impressed with me, or doing something that worked, or like making an employee be, but I needed to be okay with not doing that and just like living a good life otherwise. And so it was tough. And I guess I'm still probably searching for that perfect version of myself to some degree, but I needed to like be more than just that, I guess. And I didn't realize I needed that until I was in the moment.
Yeah. Well, tell us a little bit about the coaching experience. What does that look like practically, and what have you taken from it?
Yeah. So Chris Snyder, who obviously, Impact Architects, and I co-founded Vox Mobile. And in truth, he was way more of the founder than I was, although I was there from the very beginning. He took the bigger risks because he had more than I had at that point. He already had a family, and so it was easier for me. When he left Vox, he went through a very similar journey of trying to figure out what was best for himself, both serving his needs and his family's needs, and he landed on doing coaching, specifically EOS. And I observed that from afar because we're great friends, and I was always both like a little hesitant or suspect of that you could be fulfilled doing that, but also a little bit jealous at how free and easy and happy he always was. And so I also just didn't. I just felt like, man, like just being in a room with a company for one day and leading them through some session. And then them paying for you, that can't be enough value. Are you really delivering enough value in that moment? And so I would always tell Chris, like, I just feel like I'm taking money. And so he encouraged me to explore it a bit. And, he's been a good mentor of mine. And so my entree into coaching late last year was, doing that, like, not doing, pure EOS or anything, but like picking topics and spending a day facilitating offsites, whether it be on go-to-market or product market fit or any number of topics or organizational setup, and not like making decisions for businesses, but helping them get to the right decision.
Yeah.
I would leave those sessions feeling so friggin' energized. Like, holy cow, that was fun. And I can like move on and not think about that specific thing anymore because I can go to the next one. Like, so I kind of realized that no matter what I do for the next chapter or 2 of my story, I will, to the extent I have board investors and employees and coworkers and partners that are okay with it, I want to do some coaching on the side. I want to stick my nose in a couple other businesses in a way that allows me to, add value in little rapid bursts and then leave them to do their thing and come back. And so I'm still exploring, how that'll work out. I'm actually next week, I'm going to Detroit to do the EOS boot camp, and pretty excited to be a professional EOS implementer and get 6 or 7 clients that I can help in that way. But I really kind of converted from being a bit skeptical that could be great into like feeling the exhilaration of seeing wow moments inside these rooms that I didn't have to be a participant in from an execution, but I could be contextually aware enough to help facilitate them to those moments. And that's been fun for me a lot.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, I'll ask what maybe the initial inclination of skepticism was. Like, what is the impact of coaching? What have you seen those wow moments be like, and how should people think about coaching?
Yeah, so great question, and so maybe start a little bit farther down the process. So we're getting ready to implement EOS at Bezlio.
Yeah.
We might be a bit small for it, but that's okay because I love the principles or the outcomes we can have.
Right.
And
Well,
so,
you talked about getting the right foundation
sure.
in place.
I'm not going to implement. We're not going to do self-implement, and I'm not going to implement it. And John Carpenter, who's done EOS coaching, who runs ops for us, he's not going to implement it because we have to be. I think we really need to be vulnerable participants in the process to get the best benefit from it. So, looking at it from that lens, I think the opportunity as a coach to frankly not have the biases and jadedness or the politics that exist inside business, to not be part of that, but to help people like really try to get vulnerable and like help them understand what they want from the business, and then agree or buy into the things they need to do to get there, and do that, like really trying to drive vulnerability and open-mindedness. That's just been fascinating. And what I've learned, and I existed in this ego in my head for years, thinking I'm really good in rooms of people. I can draw. I've always been able to build teams, and so why can't I just do? I can do that. I don't need someone else standing in front of the room coaching us how to be a great business. I can do that, and I've learned that's maybe in spite of some of those those flaws, we've been successful. But there's so much more beyond that. If you open up a little bit, you allow someone else to take you through the journey. So, I was never the most coachable kid in sports. I was never the most coachable person in school, which is probably why I didn't survive very long in college. But I'm eager to kind of break through that ceiling, take my lessons that I've learned and be very coachable in the process as a participant. And I think that just enables me further to be a good coach to other folks.
Yeah. What do most businesses and leaders of those businesses not understand about go-to-market and product that you're trying to manifest and bring to the table?
Oh, go-to-market is the hardest one. So the reality behind the business isn't. So I'm intentionally involved in early stage startups. I just want to work in people that have like such an urgent desire and urgent need because they've taken capital to grow. I'm so addicted to the notion of growth. I think the biggest thing I see on go-to-market, and by the way, I've gotten this wrong a lot. But the biggest thing I see on go-to-market is people sometimes think fast is the answer, and there's skipping of steps. There's needed things like figuring out who your real customers are, and can you really succinctly say what the problem you're solving, and are you actually solving a problem? Like there's just things like that, that are important to figure out. We have limited resources in these early stage startups, and finding, doing all the activity to get enough experimentation in place, identifying what leverage you have, whether it's like I can find leverage in direct sales or in channel sales or in, whatever. And then like investing in that leverage is, I think, the secret sauce. And then helping founders figure out if they're are they go-to-market founders? Are they technology founders? I think that's kind of a fun thing. And then, being willing to be open-minded and vulnerable to make changes on the fly, I think is a real thing. So anyway, my go-to-market coaching has mostly been very framework oriented. Like, listen, we don't have to reinvent any wheel here. We're here.
Yeah.
We are in a the history books will be written about the last 30 years in our country, and it'll be there's this massive boom in technology, and most of the successful B2B SaaS companies operated the same way.
Totally.
It's already all been figured out. And so we don't need to be smarter than anyone. So that's on the go-to-market side. On the product side, I can preach what you should do in product. I'm not really great at knowing the framework of that. I'm learning along at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, that it all resonates very much. If there is any selfish part of this podcast for me, it is that it's all been about trying to figure out the best of what other people have already figured out.
Yeah.
And you don't need to reinvent the wheel.
No, I am the world's least creative startup guy ever. Everyone asks me all the time, how come you just figure out your own idea and go start? I'm like, because I don't have any new ideas. I'm just really good at things have already worked for other folks, and let's use those, and let's be willing to execute them.
So with that in mind, tell us about Bezlio.
Yeah, so Bezlio, I couldn't be more excited about Bezlio. So Bezlio is a company that was founded by two sets of brothers, Adam and Brian Ellis and Seth and Eli Remington. And they all actually had a manufacturing technology consulting company called SaberLogic for many years. Very successful, they did great work. And like a lot of folks, I think they got excited about the notion of building a SaaS business and changing their revenue model. And so at about the same time Able was being formed, and call it 2017, 2018 timeframe, Bezlio was. So we were in the same circles. We had like the same investors. We had the same fractional CFO. I mean, we were frankly very similar businesses, one in Akron, one in Cleveland. Their whole notion was that manufacturing companies needed technology to allow shop floor employees to interact with the data inside the ERP. And they built a platform in which manufacturing companies could develop their own interfaces to go do that.
Yep.
I think it was a really good idea, not particularly market tested, in that they learned along the way that manufacturing companies didn't actually have engineering departments, that even if it was low code or no code, that they weren't actually really prepared to go build those solutions themselves. And so they raised some money and they made a good run at it, and they got a little bit of traction. And then like product market fit often does to a lot of us, it kind of stalled, and they didn't quite get to that next level. And so because I was closely connected to the investors and to the folks around them, and even to Adam and Brian, I stayed relatively close to what they were doing. When we exited Able, a number of folks picked up the phone and called me and said, "Hey, are you interested in kind of helping out with Bezlio?" And to be honest, I wasn't in a place yet where I could go burden some small startup with all the things we just talked about before, like where I wanted to land. And so I wasn't prepared to do that. But last year when I decided to kind of stop working full time and I was going to join Impact Architects and do coaching and advisory services, they were the first kind of real customer I had. So, powered by Jumpstart's grit and determination to make the business something, and by Brian Ellis's, unwavering belief that he was going to build a business, they had survived, and they asked me to kind of help out. And basically, I joined as like a fractional CEO. That sounds absurd, but a fractional CEO, spending a couple days a week, helping figure out what we had, with very, very clear. I was very clear that we're gonna land with we don't have anything and we should unwind this, or there's really something here and we should go spend great time on it. And I'll obviously landed at the latter. Realized that Bezlio had 60 or 70 phenomenal customers that were extremely happy, that had a product that people were enjoying, that had, again, industry expert in Brian Ellis that, you could build a business around, and be excited about it. And then it was just a go-to-market kind of challenge. It was just ultimately we needed to do a few things on the business side, but, we had everything we needed to really go at it. So I fell in love with the opportunity. I asked the investors, "Hey, would you be willing for me to join this full time and to kind of lead this business?" And everyone said yes. And we raised about $4.5 million. We're unapologetically calling it a relaunch of the business, but I mean, frankly, we're investing a lot of that in product and marketing going forward, and we're really excited about the next phase.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's very exciting. So what is the vision for the future? Where are you going to take this business? Bezlio's whole the solution we provided, again, was about the shop floor at manufacturing companies having access, and people who work on the shop floor having access to data that lives in the ERP. So basically entering in what they're doing and consuming data. It was all about trying to make the data more accurate, and there was down channel benefits to inventory levels being more accurate, or shipping notices being more accurate. Basically all the activities. And so, but Brian's had this really great vision, and I'll be a bit coy about this because we are launching a completely new generation of the product. Honestly, we're rebranding the whole business. There's going to be a whole new launch, and so we'll come out. And so a little bit this is on the down low, if you will. But we do believe that there's a much bigger opportunity to impact the productivity level of manufacturing shop floors. We think that really the people that are super inspired by what they're doing because they believe they've done a great job, because they've done the things they're supposed to do next, and they've done those right. Those people will build great products, and the people who build great products will be great manufacturers, and manufacturing is the backbone of the economy. And so we've got this pretty big vision that we can drive workforce productivity, workforce happiness, and outputs at the manufacturing level by delivering really simple, user-centric interfaces that walk people through what they're supposed to do the right way at the right time. And so we're kind of taking the early vision of giving access to data and taking it a couple steps forward to driving activities, the right activities, in a workflow way. So our vision is to launch that. We've got 4 signed beta customers, larger signed beta customers. We've got an MVP customer that's been fantastic that we're building that with, and we are super excited about the early results of what we're seeing. So like all
really super creative people like myself. We come up with great code names. We're calling the new product Gen 2, which doesn't mean we won't continue selling Gen 1. We've just kind of re-entered customer acquisition mode and starting to generate leads on first version. But we're very excited. And I'm just excited because it's a big market. It's so fun to do these tours of shop floors and see stuff being made. Like it's like tangible outcomes.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we've got customers who make chairs. We've got customers who make burritos. We've got customers who make heating elements for semiconductor containers to carry around chips. I mean, we've got customers who make components for defense systems. It's been wild to see some of these shop floors and to see actual stuff happening and feel like you can be part of that is it's pretty easy to connect passion to that. And so, I've started to put together a team. We brought in a wonderful gentleman named Greg Gortz to run go-to-market for us from Loom. We just added a director of product. He's got a PhD in learning, and he joins next week. Brought John Carpenter, who was with me at Able and at Vox, to run ops. Brian's super happy, kind of evolving into a very customer-oriented role. So I'm really, really excited about it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it's also, I think, just from my perspective, pretty exciting because it feels like one of those classically historically underserved markets. And you talked about the happy customers. I'm sure that, I don't know, like how many people have really honed in on trying to improve this whole process?
Well, I mean, so markets can be served by status quo. So if you go look at the amount of money that's, investment capital that's poured into manufacturing technology, it's staggering. But you look at the available solutions, and there are some very large companies, and there's some ERP solutions that, tens of thousands of people are using. But I don't think that tech has really evolved significantly in a while. And so status quo is the notion that we've been serving the markets with status quo type software. And so, yeah, I mean, we're building some, modern product to solve what we think is a legacy problem to try and help organizations be more modern in how they compete. I mean, we can use all the buzzwords in the world, compete against China or, keep jobs here, whatever it is.
American dynamism.
Yeah, right, exactly. But manufacturing in America is like the 8th largest economy in the world. So there is a lot of opportunity to improve that. And from what I've seen, walking around in these plants, people are working really, really, really hard. And there's a tremendous opportunity to give them tooling to do their jobs better and be happier how they do it.
Yeah, no, it's very compelling. And do you still have this build it in Cleveland chip on your shoulder?
Yeah, without a question. Like we're doing it here. I mean, it would take a familial event or an earth-shattering type of opportunity to move to try to move this business outside of Cleveland. I mean, ultimately, to be frank, while Akron is part of Cleveland, depending on how you look at it, we moved the HQ up from Akron here. We're in Midtown Cleveland. We're cohabitating with Felix, which is another wonderful startup right around the corner from Jumpstart. I've told all the investors, to the extent. Until they can't give me any more money, I want to take Cleveland money. We want to hire, folks here, and we really want to build it. I'd love to have another great story here in Cleveland.
Yeah, I mean, you've already given us a few already, so I'm hopeful as well. As you reflect on all of it so far, how is your thinking, mentality, optimism around Cleveland as an ecosystem? How has that evolved?
If everyone if maybe I said this before, but I do believe this way, like if it's easy to not do it here, right? It's easy to say, let's take the business to Austin, or let's go to the coast, or let's go to St. Louis or Chicago, or let's go to Columbus. It's easy to make those decisions. And frankly, some of them might give us an earlier head start. I do believe a bunch of us have to decide to not do that and to stay here to create a generation of technology innovation that's we might not even be able to participate in. And I feel more so than I did last year, and certainly more so than I did 5 years ago, that is happening. I feel like there are some return founders. There's other folks who have exited business that have decided to build businesses here in Cleveland. We've got a rising tide of activity happening in the tertiary markets connected to, tertiary opportunities connected to startups. And we're sitting here in, Vivid Front's podcast studio right now, and, they're serving a bunch of startups here in Cleveland. I feel like there's more things happening. I don't think the hard work has even really started yet. Like, I think we've got a bunch of things still to do, and I think a lot of people need to be accountable to, driving the city forward. But I'm all in. Like I'm here. I'm ready to do it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Is there anything that you've changed your mind about recently, from like prior held beliefs about business, startups, ecosystem that you no longer believe?
Wow. As part of my journey to becoming a professional EOS coach, you have to come up with your story. And this is like a 1-minute presentation of yourself. And some of this, like, I of course have to suspend some of my own like disbelief. Like I've been doing this for 25 years. I don't need you to tell me how to build my story. But I mean, I'm willing to go through their process. And honestly, I think the biggest one we've already touched on is like I didn't really believe 3 years ago that you needed like a written down framework for how you operate your business. I frankly just didn't. I thought you could do it without that, and I thought some of that was just overhead and burden. But I've been looking back, trying to look back at myself as I'm building my story and think, okay, my father was an entrepreneur his entire life. Like he started so many businesses, and frankly, most of them were failures. There was a lot of like grow for a couple months and then crash and burn. And my father was a dreamer. I mean, still is, lives in Tampa. Maybe he'll hear this and maybe not. I don't know, maybe he'll be mad about me talking about it or not. I don't know. But like he was a dreamer. He always dreamed wealth and big opportunity were just around the corner from him, whether it was like going to play the right lottery numbers or going to start the right Avon business or going to build the next great electrical company or there was any number of endeavors. And I just thought the impracticality of it was so clear. Like, this is just ridiculous. Like, get a job, go to work, feed your family. That's the American dream. Like, what are we doing here? And so I spent a bunch of my like late teenage years, like never thinking entrepreneurship was my way. I was going to be the best IT guy. I was going to end up being the CIO of some university one day, and away I went, and no big deal. Yeah. I stumbled either accidentally or by some subconscious calling into entrepreneurship, and I just operated because I have really fairly good instincts and good decision making. And so along the way, I realized I was right about both those things. Like particularly in the past like 12 or 24 months, realizing like entrepreneurship is somewhat impractical, but you can add a pragmatic lens to that. And a system like EOS or a system or some other sort of business operating system gives you the framework to kind of like thrash against it as an entrepreneur with dreams, but like operate super pragmatically and super practically. And so while I was always kind of like those things were kind of competing in my head and I just felt like I could do it without something, I have definitely changed my mind over the past little while that like you need a system. And I guess so much so that I did not put a system like EOS inside of Able intentionally. Frankly, had the starts of it and pulled back and said no, so we don't need it. And now we're certainly doing it differently at Bezlio because I think we can be even that much better. Yeah. I know that's a little bit of I kind of cheated on that answer because we've already talked about it, but it's the best I have right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, something that Chris Snyder has mentioned that's always stuck with me is, basically every business has an operating system, but it's either and a framework, but it's either intentional or it's not.
Unintentional. Yeah.
So it's helpful to be intentional about it.
Yeah, I guess that is I guess I now don't believe that like me trying to be super smart is the best thing. Like we need an intentional approach to it.
Yeah. Is there anything we haven't covered here that you think is particularly important to share about your journey, the work to be done at Bezlio?
I shared with you right as we were sitting down. My grandmother died this past week. Passed away. She was 86, and I'm going to Louisiana. It's right when we're done here to back to my hometown or I guess my where I was raised. Cleveland's my hometown now, but where I was raised to see family and to celebrate my grandmother. I'm going to give a eulogy, and as I'm writing the eulogy, I literally have a section there. I'm like, man, it's so dangerous in giving a eulogy because you're going to forget some story, you're going to forget some favorite aunts that you should bring up in the process. And I guess that to create a parallel, it's a little bit dangerous doing this as well because some people will listen to this and I'll get a text like, hey, you forgot to mention that, or like, how come you didn't say so and so's name? So I guess the only thing I want to mention is that this is the success of Able or my own personal successes are literally my portion of that is luck. That was all done on the back of like an incredible group of people that maximized opportunity. I think I can't thank enough, the investors, the local investors here, the Jumpstarts and North Coast, and frankly a tremendously active group of angel investors that support all sorts of endeavors. I think we've got a great an emerging but great ecosystem there. I can't thank enough of the people that have been on this journey multiple times with me, or that I get to be on the journey multiple times with them. That's amazing. And then obviously all of our families who get to support us through this whole these processes. They're all the real heroes in this, and we're just kind of like maximizing the lucky opportunities that jump in front of us.
Yeah. You talked about your inflated ego. That's some sincere humility right there. So.
Appreciate that. Yeah.
and gratitude. Well, I'll ask you our traditional closing question, and I did revisit the tapes here, so you'll have to come up with something new. But it's for the hidden gems in Cleveland, and you spoke about Lake Erie Islands and Kelly's Island specifically. So you can reflect on that one, but anything else about Cleveland and Northeast Ohio that other people should know about?
Oh man, I can't. I'm so mad that I said that before because since then in our evolution, my family's actually we've acquired a little place in Catawba, and we've been spending even more time there. And we just in the last 3 weekends we were both at Kelly's in Put-in Bay with friends and family and had a wonderful time there. So I'm mad I said that. I guess I'll go with the Metro Parks. So I moved last time we talked. I just moved into my new house. We moved so we lived in Hinckley, a southern suburb, and Hinckley was right kind of in the midst of the large metro parks. And now I live in Avon, in a western suburb, and learning more about the Lorraine County metro parks out there. I don't think people understand the green space opportunity we have here. I mean, it is. Even when you fly in, if you're on a northern approach into Cleveland and you get a chance to fly over like the Rocky River Reservation and fly over the river, I mean we have incredible outdoor green space opportunity and a lot of like great topography in this area. And my wife is just a lover of hiking and that and whatnot. So I think hidden gem would be like spend time in those areas. Like you don't have to travel 3 hours away to find beautiful outdoor opportunities here. So
yeah, it's all right here.
Yep.
Cool. Well, Gerald, I just want to thank you for being the first time second guest and coming back on the podcast.
Super honored, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. If people had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, your coaching, Bezlio, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, I mean, I'm very active on LinkedIn. You can find me, hit me up on LinkedIn. You can email me at gerald@impactarchitects.io. I'm also at gerald@bezel.io. And I mean, it's not hard to find me around town. A lot of people know me. It's easy to get in contact with me.
Bezel.io is good. It's Bezlio.
That's how it came about. I don't listen. I mean, we are changing the name of the business to kind of refresh things. So don't fall in love with it too much.
Got it. Clever though. Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, Gerald.
Thank you.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternjefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.